So here we go. All right. So jazz history. All right. So I'm sorry, jazz theory. All right. So something that jazz theory can be really a mystery to a lot of people, and it's not as complex as you would think it is. Um, because most of the harmony that we deal with in jazz, 85% of it is based on the major scale. So this may be, review for some of you, but don't worry, we'll get into some more stuff later. But I just want to make sure everybody, we start from the beginning. So basically, 85% of the harmony is based on the major scale. So we have what's called modes of the major scale. Modes of the major scale, and there's seven of them. And I'm sure a lot of you know what those modes are, but I'm just going to go over them quickly so that we know what they are. Yeah, if you want to put your video camera on, that's fine. If you don't, I'm cool with that too. Doesn't matter. All right. So the first mode of the major scale is Ionian, and that's simply called. Uh, it's another name for major. All right. So I'll let you guys hear what that sounds like. So we have good old major scale, right? Um, so whenever you're trying to think of what a major scale sounds like, to me it sounds like home. So it's a normal homey type major scale, and in this case we're starting on C. So Ionian is the first mode. The second mode is Dorian. So Dorian, if I take that same C major scale and I start on D, but play in the key of C, I will get a scale that no longer sounds major. It sounds minor. Right? So Dorian is the second mode. All right? Now if I continue on this major scale and start on the third degree, I will get a scale that's called Phrygian. So I would encourage you to take notes here. For those of you that don't know about this, for those of you that do know about it, just hang on for a second. All right, so Phrygian, that's Phrygian. Phrygian. Sounds like this. Right? So Phrygian to me sounds like a minor scale, but it's a little bit darker on the color spectrum. Just a little bit darker. All right. All right. And one of my favorite modes, number four, is Lydian. That's Lydian. Make sure you're keeping an eye on that waiting.
Yep.
Waiting.
Yep.
Um, Lydian is based off of the fourth mode. So if we continue in the key of C, which has no sharps and no flats, right? So Lydian almost sound major, but it's a little bit more impressionistic, a little bit brighter than the major scale. And the thing that I love about the Lydian scale is to me, it sounds like it has two leading tones in it. So normally in a major scale, that note is the leading tone, right? The seventh note. So, but in Lydian, it sounds like it has two leading tones. So, right? One, two, three, four, five. So that's a nice leading tone. So Lydian is one of my favorite modes. So brighter than major, a little bit more impressed in it.
Let's restart that computer.
Um, and then the next mode, Mixolydian. Mixolydian. So that's Mixolydian. This is a very plain, sort of dominant uh, seven scale. And in this case, we're going to start on G, but we're in the key of C. That that seventh note is flat. So it sounds like a major scale with a flat seven. All right. What do you got? Checking in the chat here. We're cool. All right. So we're gonna continue. The next mode, Aeolian. Aeolian. Right? And this Aeolian scale is the minor scale to me that when we're in a major key, it also sounds like it could be home as well. So it's another term for this is the relative minor. So say for instance you're in the key of C. If you start that same scale on A, you get a relative minor. All right. And then the last mode is Locrian. That's Locrian. And Locrian is a half diminished scale. We'll get into what that means later, but it's the darkest of the scales, and it starts on the seventh degree. So for C, right, that first half step sounds really dark, right? So when you hear that sound, that is Locrian. Okay, that's great. So we know what scales are. We know what they're called. So what is their purpose, right? So their purpose is that in this major scale that we deal with, each one of these scale degrees has a chord built on it. All right. So we call these diatonic triads and diatonic seventh chords. So what is a triad? All right. Triad is a really simple concept. It is basically the one, the three, and the five, say in a major key, right? But it simply means triad, literally three notes. So if you play three notes simultaneously, you get a triad. It could be right. It could be three notes. That's literally what it means. All right. But in this context, when we say diatonic, diatonic means in a key. All right. Everybody hanging with me? Anybody lost yet? Anybody need me to slow down? All right. Yeah, Gary's like, man, let's get it going. Sam. All right. Cool. So diatonic triads simply means if I play in the key of C, this is we're just going to use C to keep it easy. If it's off the one chord, oh no, sorry, someone's calling me. All right, sorry about that. It won't stop ringing. Oh, um, somebody just signed up for the camp, and I think we're trying to get it. Sorry, guys. Just 1 second here. Um, Tate, I'm gonna forward you an email. Will you please just take care of this?
Yes, sir.
And then I'm gonna forward you.
you want me to add them in, or do you want me to?
Hold on just one second. Yeah, just add them in. Tell them to try again.
This Alexander guy wasn't on the list that you gave me.
Um, yeah, just let him in. That's
Okay.
that's his parents' name. And then the second email that I'm sending you, forward them the Zoom link so that they can join.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. I don't know why someone would wait until 10 p.m., 10 a.m. to sign up for a camp that starts at 10 a.m., but that's what happened. All right, so cool. All right, so we're talking about all these triads that exist on each degree of the major scale. So off the one, it's always major. No matter the key, it's always major, right? Off of the two, it's always minor. Off of three, it's always minor. Off of the four, it's always major. Off of the five, the triad is major. Very important. The triad is major. Uh, and off of the six, diminished. The triad is diminished. All right. So what does major mean? Major chord just simply means that you have a major third stacked on top of a minor third. So all right. Or if you want to look at it as just skipping every other note in the major scale, you can do that as well. Right? Skip G, skip E, skip F, G. Alright? So cool. All of those are always, no matter the key, whether you're in C, whether you're in B flat, whether you're in E flat, the one is going to always be major, the two is always going to be minor, the three is going to the four is going to be major. The five is going to be a major triad. The six is going to be a minor triad, and the seventh is going to be diminished. So, what is diminished? Diminished scale. The diminished chord is all minor thirds stacked forever. So, all right. How you can recognize a diminished chord is like the sound of like in those old movies where the train is getting closer. You know, oh, the train is getting closer. The train is getting closer, right? The train is getting closer. That kind of sound, right? That's how you can always recognize diminished. All right. So in jazz, though, we typically don't deal with triads very much. We like to add sevenths, extensions, or tensions to the chords, right? So how we do that is we just keep going up the scale and add the seventh note. So for instance, skip six, seven. All right, guys, people keep. Okay, I'm gonna text you a number and just give them a call.
Okay, we'll do. Is that Alexander or Tammy?
I don't know. Just call. Kip is the person you need to talk to.
Okay, will do. I'll be back.
All right. Once again, my apologies, guys. All right, continuing on. So now if we add that seventh note, we get a much more colorful sound. So off of the 1, still major. 2, still minor. Off of the 3, still minor. Off of the 4, major. Off of the 5, this is where it's different. The triad is major, but the 5 is a dominant 7th chord. Right? What is a dominant 7th chord, you ask? The most simple way to think about a dominant 7th chord is that it is a major triad and you flat the 7. Major triad with a flat 7. That's a major 7, you just flat it. Cool? Alright, off of the 6, minor. And then off of the 7, this is different. Alright? Off of the 7th, we have diminished. But the 7th is a half diminished chord. So what does half diminished mean? Can anybody tell me in the chat? Or speak out? I want to make sure everybody's awake.
Half diminished has a seventh that is raised rather than flattened.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, like instead of like doing a full minor thirds, one of the top minor third is like a major third instead. Or no, it's a seventh, right? It's a seventh, regular 7.
You're getting closer.
Someone in the chat said it.
Diminished triad with a flat 7, right? So fully diminished, right? But that's a double flatted 7th. So now, if you raise that note, you now get a diminished triad with just a flat 7 instead of a double flatted 7th. All right. So, in jazz, if you guys have looked at lead sheets, I know that seems like very basic to some of you, but like if you look at lead sheets to tunes, literally these are the most chords that we deal with. We deal with major chords, right? We deal with minor chords, we deal with dominant chords, and then we deal with half diminished chords. And in some cases, we deal with diminished triads, right? So this is literally 85% of the harmony that we deal with. But there always seems to be some mystery when I work with people on understanding that. So it's really important to focus a lot of your practice time and theory knowledge on knowing all of these major scales, and then knowing each mode and knowing each chord in every key that exists on those. All right? Cool. All right. So now I would encourage you guys to practice these on your instruments. Just going. Right? You can go up all of them. You can go up one, down one. Right? Doing that in all keys. In C, that would be really easy for some people, but make sure you can do it in B. Make sure you can do it in F sharp. Make sure you can do it in E, right? All those keys. You can go down one, up one. Right? You can do that. Cool? And then you could go down them both. Right? So you've got 4 directions you can go. Up, 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 down, down, up, and down, down. Right? I guarantee you, if you do that in every key, you will have a better understanding of each major scale, and then the corresponding chords on them. Right? So, cool. All right, so that's great. You can play all of your scales in every key. You can play all of your chords down, down, up, down, every which way, right? Right? But how do these chords function? All right. So let's talk about chord function really quickly. Um, let me chat. Okay, we're good. Let's talk about how these chords function. So, who can? The first function of chords is tonic function. So tonic, tonic. Right. So, how do how who can tell me what a tonic function is? Sam, you got something?
Yeah, I was gonna say like the most resolved function, like the one chord.
Yeah, so like at home, right? So tonic in a key, the key center, right? Um, so in a major key, there are three tonic functions. Who can tell me what they are? Anybody?
Is it the 1, 4, and 5 chords? Not sure.
Close. So tonic means in a key, right? So we got the one. That's a if we're in C major, one is definitely the tonic. But there's also two other chords that when we're in C, we can also sound like we're in home. Right? Right? What is that? What is that? You can tell me. All right, so guys, write this down. All right, so our tonic functions when we're in a major key are the one chord, the three chord, and the six chord. All right, so in key of C, right, that sounds like home, but I could also briefly resolve to E minor, and we still sound like we're in the key of C, right? All right, so now, what if I wanted to sound like I was in A minor for a second? So now I could go. And now I'm back to C. Right? So tonic functions in a major key are 1, 3, and 6. Alright? So if you know that, when you're in a key and you're trying to sound like you're at home, you should probably pick one of those chords. Right? So 1, 3, and 6. Okay? Cool. Alright? So now we have tonic functions. We also have another function, which is the dominant function. All right. So chords that are dominant function are based off of the fifth. All right. So the fifth is the dominant chord. So the fifth always wants to sound like it goes to one. So when we play that, it does not sound like we're at home, right? It wants to go. All right. Also, the other dominant function is the diminished triad. Right? So the purpose of a dominant function is to create tension and resolve it to a tonic function. All right? So if we know that when we're writing music and dealing with music, we should see dominant chords resolving to tonic chords. So for instance, right? So it's really you really need to have an understanding of that. because if you don't, what will happen is you will write music that sounds like it doesn't progress. Like if I just did this, right? That doesn't really sound like it's going anywhere. But if I was like, right? So now that sounds more like a progression. All right. So if tonic chords sound like home and dominant functions sound like they create tension, the only other function we have in a major key is the subdominant. So what do you think subdominant means? Who can tell me? In in place? Is it in place? Not in place. What does sub mean? Like if I was like, man, sub zero. What does that mean? Sub zero temperature. Before the dominant chord, right? Or yeah, below, sub below, but before, right? Tate, did you get that other thing squared away?
I didn't. I did not. You might need to allow. You might need to allow rejoining.
Okay. Well, you're a co-host, so you can do that. All right. Cool. So below the dominant chord or before the dominant chord. So the only other ones we have left are the 2 and the 4 chord, right? Because if 1, 3, and 6 are tonic functions, and 5 and 7 are dominant functions, then we only have 2 left, and that's the 4 and the 2, right? So now, if you know that subdominant chords come before dominant chords, and dominant chords resolve to tonic chords, you now can write music that sounds like it progresses. Right? So now, so that's why in jazz you see a lot of 2-5-1. So 1-2-5-1, right? Or 1-4-5-1, or 1-3-6-2-5-1. That's a little bit delayed, right? So we went to all of our tonic functions. See, it doesn't really sound like it starts progressing until we get to that subdominant chord going to the dominant chord, going to the tonic chord. All right? So, who has ever heard of the term secondary dominance? Joseph? All right, what is a secondary dominant?
Like a dominant chord that's not the 5 of the key you're in.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, so it's a dominant chord because there's only one dominant chord in a key, right? That's the 5, right? Because we talked about that earlier. So for instance, if I played the C major and then I want to play. Now I'm in E minor. That chord that I played was not in the key of C major. All right. So secondary dominant. When if you guys study music in college, some of you have studied music. They tend to complicate it. Secondary dominant is simply a dominant chord that's borrowed from another key. So it's borrowed from the key that you're going to, basically. So what I mean by that is if I'm in C major and I want to go to, let's say, another tonic function in that key. So 8 6, right? So what is the 5 chord of A minor? Anybody? E7. Thank you. Right? So now if I borrow that E7, now I'm in A minor. Right? So literally that's all secondary dominants are. Where am I going? What's the dominant chord of that key? So for instance, if I wanted to go from C major to A flat major, see, that's weird to jump like that. But if I know that the E flat 7 is the 5 of A flat, right? Doesn't matter. Now I'm back to C. Now right? So I can just borrow those chords from the key that I'm going to, right? So that's why a tune like Giant Steps works, right? Because literally the first chord is B major 7, then D7, then now we're in G, right? Then B flat 7, now we're in E flat, right? So literally that's all you need to do to change keys is to borrow that dominant chord from that key. All right? So that's secondary dominance. Because you'll get all this stuff of like, oh, this is the 5 of 5, and this is the 2 of 5 of 2, and the 5 of 3, and that's great. But all you really need to know is that it is a dominant chord that is borrowed from the key that you are going to. All right? We're getting there. We're getting there. All right. Really quickly, let's talk about the blues. Can't have jazz without the blues. All right. So now the blues is two different. First of all, it's a form, right? Typically 12 bars. Uh, it's without any major seventh chords. And the blues is a combination of major and minor harmony, tonic chords, one chords, and all dominant sevenths. So I'm talking about the most basic form of the blues, right? So the blues starts on the one chord. But the weird thing is that the blues, the one chord is a dominant chord. So we've talked about all of this theory, but theory doesn't apply to the blues. So um, the blues, the one chord is a dominant chord now, and then the four chord, we go to the four chord in the fifth bar. That is a four chord, and then we go back to the one chord, and then we go back, and then we do what's called a turnaround. So we have 5, 4, and then 1. So you guys probably all know the blues progression. Who doesn't know the blues progression in here? Just type it in the chat. Don't be afraid. Okay, I don't. Okay, great. Garrett Paxton, I don't. All right, cool. So I'm going to talk about that really quickly for you guys. So whatever key you're in, right? Let's say you're saying play an F blues. Probably what you're told in school is to play the F blues scale over the whole thing. But that doesn't really tell you what the blues is. All right? So just remember the blues progression, and we're talking about the basic blues progression. We'll get into some substitutions here in a second. But the basic blues progression is the one chord, and it is a dominant chord. So let's just talk in the key of F. So the blues progression, the first 4 bars are the one chord. So if we're in F, and it's a dominant chord. Remember, Gary and Paxton, we talked about the dominant chord being a major triad with a flat seven. Right? So now we have, and that chord exists for 4 bars. All right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right? And so now in the fifth bar, we go to the 4 chord. All right. So Paxton, if we're in the key of F, what is the fourth note of F major scale? Yeah, B flat. Awesome. So now we're gonna build a dominant chord off of B flat. Major triad, flat seven. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 1, 2. All right. So for 2 bars. So now we've got the 1 chord for 4 bars, the 4 chord for 2 bars. All right. So if you want to just write like 12 measures, guys, so and I can send you this sheet, so it'll look something like this. You can't see it because of, but all right. So for those 2 measures, we go to the 4 chord. Then for the next 2 measures of the form, we go back to the 1 chord. So now we've got one, all right. And then the last part is pretty simple. We go 5, right? So Gary, do you play any, like, you play drums, right?
Yeah,
Do you play any mallets at all? Just
a
drum.
little bit.
Okay. All right. So if you're in the key of F, like, do you know your F major scale on mallets, or
Yeah.
so what is the fifth note of F major?
Would be just B, right?
What's that?
Wait. Just be C, right?
Yeah, C. There you go. So now we have the 5 C E G B flat, right? The major triad with a flat 7, and then we go 4. So the 4 in F major is B flat because we already established that in the fifth bar, right? And then back to the 1. So that's the blues. So 1 for 4 bars, doesn't matter the key, right? 4 for 2 bars, 1 for 2 bars, 5 for 1 bar, 4 for 1 bar, and then 1 for 2. That is the basic blues. And so those are all dominant chords. And what we can remember from before, a dominant chord is simply a major triad. So what you learned, in concert band, right? That part, right? Right? But then you add the flat 7. So what is the flat 7? Right? That's the 7. You just flat that note. So now we have a major triad with a flat 7. So that's how you can always figure out what a dominant chord is. All right?
Okay.
So yeah, the blues form is pretty simple. And so what I'll do for you guys, I'll download that blues progression, and I'll email it to you guys, Gary and Paxton, so you can have it. Cool. All right, that's the blues. All right, so now I want to talk about the other parts that we don't um, deal with as often, but we do deal with. And the first one that we really deal with is the melodic minor scale. All right. So if you've heard of the melodic minor scale, in jazz, we do it a little bit different than in classical music. So for some of you that may not study jazz or may go on to college and take music theory, um, what I'm telling you is not wrong, but you'll be told something different. I just want to clarify that. So a melodic minor scale in classical music is played simply just like a major scale, but we just flat the third, and they do it ascending. So it'll sound like this. All right. So C major, no sharps, no flats. All we do is flat the third note. All right. So in jazz and classical music, we both play it the same way, ascending. All right. So major scale with a flat three. But in classical music, when they go down, they also flat the seven and the six. So it sounds like this. All right. But in jazz, we play it the same way, ascending and descending. All right. Now, if I take that scale and I do the same thing that I did with a major scale, I get modes of the melodic minor scale. All right. So the first mode is just simply called melodic minor. All right. And the chord that we get off of that is a rather exotic sounding chord. That is a minor major seven. All right. So the minor major seven is a minor triad with a major seven on top. So now, all right. So whenever you see a chord that says minor major seven, that's what that is. And we're running out of time, so I wanted to talk about the other two most popular modes of the melodic minor scale, and then I'll see if you guys have any questions, and then if not, we can get into the other modes. All right, so the mode that you definitely need to know outside of your major scale. So I would learn all your major scales, and then I would learn um, this scale. It is called the altered scale. It is called the diminished whole tone scale. All right, and so this scale is based off of the seventh mode of melodic minor. All right, so if I take my C melodic minor, so C major flat the third, right? But now I start this scale on this note, I get a really cool sounding scale. All right. So we typically play this scale on altered dominance. So what do I mean by altered dominance? I wish I had more time. But altered dominants are basically these dominant chords, and then we add tensions or extensions to them. So the extensions of the chords, just really quickly, are basically the other notes in the scale. So we have 1, 3, 5, 7, right? Those are our chord tones. And then the 2, 4, and 6 are the other notes that we don't use in the scale. So if we bring those notes up an octave, we get what's called tension. So for instance, if I had a C7 chord, which is a C dominant, all right? So now I'm going to add that second note up an octave. So D, concert D, right? I'm going to, right? So that gives it a little more color. If I add the fourth note up an octave, something weird happens. Doesn't sound very good. So typically when we do that 4 up an octave, we sharp that note. and that's called the sharp 11. So how you figure out what the tension is you take the note in the scale and you add 7 to it. So 2 plus 7 is 9, right? 4 plus 7 is 11, and then 6 plus 7 is 13, right? So now we have the sharp 11 and then the 13 on top, right? That sounds like jazz, right? So that's what we have there. All right. So now if we alter those notes, we can also flat and sharp the 9. So this is what, if we go, and then we flat the 9, we get this. All right. If we sharp it, you get a chord that sounds like this. All right. If now the 13, we can only flat the 13 because if we sharp the 13, we will just get a flat 7 up an octave. So now we flat the 13. Pretty dense chord, right? So usually, if you have the flat 13, you'll have the sharp 9 accompanying it. It makes it sound better. All right. So I want to open it up for questions. Sorry we didn't get to everything, but I want to open it up if you have any questions about things that I talked about, things that theory questions that you have that I did not get something more advanced. So ask away. Can you say the scale degrees of the altered scale? Okay, cool. Altered scale is based on the 7th mode of melodic minor. I'll say that again. The altered scale is based off of the 7th mode of melodic minor. So for instance, if you have a B altered chord, or let's say B7, right? So major triad, flat 7. So to figure out what altered scale you play is just a simple formula. So I say to myself, the chord is B7, B7 flat 9, B7 sharp 9, B7 flat 13, B7 altered. Then I say, what melodic minor scale is B the 7th note of? So, and it's pretty easy to figure it out because it's always a half step away because the 7th is raised. So B is the 7th note of the C melodic minor scale. So if I take my C major scale and I flat the 3rd, I get a C melodic minor scale. Now all I need to do is start on the 7th note. So in this key, it's B, C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B. Those are the notes of the scale. Did that answer your question, Josh? Okay, cool. What do they do flat and classical? Yeah. So descending in classical music, it basically you flat the 7th and the 6th descending. So in this key, right? C, E flat, I'm sorry, C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B, C. Now instead of playing B, we play B flat. And instead of playing A, we play A flat. So you can hear it when the scale is going up, it sounds like it's rising, and because when it's flat going down, it sounds like it's, descending. So cool. So cool. Any other? Are there? are there intervals in the altered scale whole steps? Yeah. So, Portner, thanks for answering that, asking that question. So, the altered scale, another name for it is diminished whole tone. So this may be easier for you to think about it this way. For me, it's easier to think of it just as the seventh mode of melodic minor, but you can think about it in intervals. So diminished, which we didn't get to, uh, but the diminished scale comes in two forms. Diminished scale is consisting of half steps and whole steps alternating, or whole steps and half steps alternating. So, for instance, if I start on C and I alternate half steps and whole steps, I get a scale that sounds like this. All right. And now, if I start with the whole step first, I get a scale that sounds like this. All right. So the first scale we use, diminished scale started with half steps, we use on dominant 7, flat 9 scales. And the other one we use on diminished chords. So why the altered scale is called a diminished whole tone is because it starts, so it starts half step, whole step, half step, but then the second half of the scale is all whole steps. So you have half step, half step, whole, then back down, whole, half step, half step. So it's half diminished, half whole tone. So why that scale is called a diminished whole tone. So at the end of that scale, you get a lot of whole steps. Did that answer your question? All right. Cool. All right, so we're going to take a 5-minute break. The next up is Ryan Heinlein. Timing is everything. A lot of times we talk about scales and theory, but this book deals with rhythm. So it's interesting. And you can apply these from very beginner to advanced concept. So, Tate, are you there?
Yes, I am. I need to talk to you on the phone about the person who's still trying to get in.
Okay.
Some food.